All right, come on. Can we just do this? Hi. Hello. I'm Hector, the well-endowed. You've got a bunch of Pegasi. Let's make a deal.
What kind of deal?
All right, I take her by the hand and lead her to the stable. I light a candle and rip off a piece of my tunic, which I fashion into a blindfold.
Oh, Hector, but I don't know if I...
Shh. I place it gently over the elf maiden's eyes.
Tune up, level up your fun, tune up. Your quest has now begun, tune up. We'll show you how it's done. Tune up, tune up, tune up, tune up. Tune, level up your fun, tune up. Your quest has now begun.
Well, happy Valentine's Day, everybody. We're going to be releasing this episode on Valentine's Day. You are listening to Tabletop Tune-Up. My name is Ben Dyer, and I'm joined by my partner in crime,
Heyo.
Mark Lehman. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. How you been this week?
Okay, yeah. You know, playing games, getting stuff done, getting the work off my desk, and having a good time.
The work never stops. But here we are. Valentine's Day is quickly approaching as we're recording. What are we talking about today, Ben?
Mark, as it's coming up to Valentine's Day, we wanted to celebrate that holiday in true Tabletop Tune-Up style. So today we're going to talk about romance in your RPGs.
Not the topic I ever wanted to talk about. I'll be honest with you, Ben, but here we are.
Here we are. And, you know, look, it's a part of great stories and great characters, so we shouldn't neglect it. But I think you can do this stuff with a light touch, and it can be a lot of fun if you're thoughtful and careful with it.
That is true. I've seen it. And yeah, you're right. If it's done with a little bit of tact, I think it can be a lot of fun.
In this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about what's fun about it, and we'll talk a little bit about how to keep it from getting awkward and weird and being actually a way to drive story and character development forward in fun new ways.
Well, speaking of awkward and weird, Ben, I think we should start with some boundaries so it doesn't get awkward and weird.
I think that's the first rule for this kind of thing. So, Mark, what kind of boundaries do you set? How do you do it? How do you make sure that people know before you go into a game that we're not going to get strange?
Yeah, you really got to have some boundaries if you're going to ever engage in, like if you want romance in your game, there's going to have to be some clear rules. Let's just put it that way. Discuss that comfort level with your group. What level of comfort are you willing to have at your table, before you have romance as a feature? Player consent's going to be a big part of that. And this is not just one player consenting to have this. Remember, we're all at the table together. There's people who just don't want to see this.
Yeah, I think you're right that it needs to be pretty unanimous. I don't think this is one of those things where two players can say, oh, we consent and we're going to do that. And then the rest of you guys have to sit here and just feel like awkward onlookers as there's PDA going on and who knows. That is to say, in-game PDA,
Yeah, you got to establish your safe words.
Yeah, that's right. Now, there are groups that are going to be, that will want to really kind of, if you'll forgive the term, go deep on that concept.
Oh, wow. The cringe is already starting.
Yeah, speaking of setting boundaries, I'm not going to use that word again. Anyway.
That's so good.
So here's the thing. The important thing here, like everything else you do in your game, is find those boundaries, find what players are comfortable with, respect what everybody's comfort levels are with all this stuff.
To get a sense of those boundaries, maybe it could just be a conversation at the start of a game, or maybe it just happens over the course of the game where somebody decides, hey, I want to pursue something and some sort of storyline within the game. Then you could have that conversation. But there are ways people do this beforehand. I've seen these like questionnaires. What do they call these? Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of different terms. Usually this happens in session 0. And we've talked a little bit about how to do a good session 0, I think, in one of our past episodes. Mm-hmm. Having a kind of checklist of things people are or are not willing to play with in the game. And sometimes this is about people's boundaries with respect to other things that have nothing to do with romance. It could be body horror or swear words or...
I've been in one game, and a lot of it was some people just didn't like animals being like mistreated in a game.
Oh, yeah. I was in one game where a person said, hey, my father died from nicotine, and so I'm just going to imagined for the sake of our world building. It was a kind of a modern set superhero game. He said, can we just pretend for the sake of this world and this game that we're building that like nicotine was never discovered as a thing you could smoke? Like there was no tobacco in this world. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. Sure, why not?
And you're like dragging the cigarette at the table, right? I mean, no, just kidding.
Well, I think, what's funny there is that does kind of challenge you. You go, well, I wonder what other things people would have as bad habits.
Yeah. Role playing.
That's right. Role-playing games. Well, so yeah, you've got all kinds of safety tools. There's all kinds of things you can do to make sure everybody is comfortable with the kind of stories you're going to tell that may include this. Mark, what's next? How do we really avoid cringe in the actual gameplay elements of this kind of stuff?
Ben, let's get to first base and talk about avoiding cringe. There's different ways you can kind of get around some of the more awkward elements of this. One I found shifting from the first person role playing that is typically done and shift that to the third person. Now you're talking outside the character. My character does this. My character expresses his love. My character expresses these sentiments, and you don't have to go through the act of doing the whole thing.
Right. I mean, if you make serious eye contact with the other player while you're in first person, I'm just going to say the lines in that game are going to be really tough to maintain.
So in that kind of scenario, you're in a sense describing the romance rather than acting it out.
Yeah. And again, I want to say that there are groups where this might be something people want to do, but I think for most of the groups out there, we're telling a different kind of story, and we want romance to be something that our characters have as a part of their story, but it's not really what we want to take our time with a lot. So this idea of shifting from first person into third person is a way of actually creating a little bit of distance so we can actually tell the story, as opposed to trying to come up with the dialogue and the expressions and the tones that would make us credible as romantic partners, I guess.
It gives the table, the other people, they look like they're watching a narrative. They're listening to a story rather than, watching their GM and their player have this kind of awkward conversation. So they're not part of that improv. But they are enjoying a story.
Right. We'd all much rather be watching Peter Falk as the grandfather talking about Wesley and Buttercup than watching two players actually trying to perform Wesley and Buttercup.
Yeah. So they're and it's funny. We opened that clip with the community episode where Abed and Annie they're really role playing this out almost. And when she's like, shh, there's just everybody at the table is just like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
But they're all, and Troy is oddly interested.
Well, yeah.
On that note, we're kind of talking about the episode, how humor plays a big part of it.
That's right. I mean, when you think about rom-coms, that's a thing that's normal in those shows, right? It's the missed connection. It's the fight over something stupid, the misunderstanding. This kind of formula goes all the way back to Shakespeare. You'll find all the comedies were like that, where there's misunderstandings and there's words that were said to avoid being vulnerable with that person. But eventually, you could let your true feelings come out. And ultimately, they might never kiss until the last scene of the play or the movie, depending on the kind of rom-com that it is. And you can do that in your game, right? You can sort of focus on the parts of it that are the suspenseful bit.
Yeah, and also the humor is a really fun way to have the others people get involved in a sense, because they're now laughing.
Right.
And they're part, when they're laughing, they're part of the scene. And that's fun. So,
but Mark, if they're not laughing and they're you're reading the room as the GM and you're feeling like, this is taking a sideways turn, what do?
Abort, get out of there.
That's right. Yeah. Take a pause.
So that's some tips on avoiding the cringe. What about let's go Ben. Let's go to second base here.
Okay.
Player.
I never wanted to hear that from you.
Player and NPC romance.
Okay. So yeah,
Ben, I'm committing to this bit, damn it. So
yeah,
player,
I can see that.
Player and an NPC romance.
It's all about commitment after all, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about two different things. We're going to talk about when your players have romantic connections to NPCs, and then later when your players have connections. What?
Slow it down there, Ben.
All right, here we go. Let's get into this thing.
Okay.
So one thing you can do is your players may have opportunities for stories that incorporate an NPC that is a romantic interest for them. And so we've talked a moment ago about how to avoid cringe, but now let's talk about the things you do want to do. As we said, let them be sincere. Let them have some of the awkwardness and the sincerity. Don't put them on the spot a lot. To give you a couple examples, as a player, I wrote a backstory into a character who is essentially the kind of the shy and not really romantically viable character. I think we've talked before about my thief Renzo, who had this kind of Peter Lorre aspect to him. He sounded very not wholesome, not the kind of guy that would be the top of the dating pool list, and so he was somebody who pined for the lovely Amelia. And Mark, I remember as a GM, you had a lot of fun with Amelia's father.
Yeah, we definitely played some of that a little bit for laughs at the expense of Renzo. I mean, honestly, let's face it. It's
true.
It was a fun way to kind of take your hero down a peg. And the other players at the table kind of rallied around Renzo in some capacity, like, yeah, go Renzo, go. It was fun. It was,
yeah.
And it was like, we didn't plan it too much. It was something that came up every once in a while.
Renzo would go off and have adventures, and when he'd come back to town, we might have a scene where he's kind of mooning over her a little bit, or there's an opportunity to have dinner at the house. And, it was one of those kind of sitcom scenes where the father, his name was Piter, would just be cold and
glaring,
judgmental and things like that. And it was a lot of fun there. As a GM, I was running a Star Wars game where a couple of characters had a kind of very slow burning, on again, off again, and it was one of these things that was interesting to watch the players kind of manage as a thing that would go on between action scenes. And you've seen the thing that happens in action movies where there'll be a romantic subplot because, of course, these characters have been put in stressful situations and they've had to depend on each other, and they end up making fierce eye contact. And the players never actually did that. They did the thing that we just talked about where we stepped back and did a very third person story. And it was artful and it was restrained and it was nice and it was cool. And it didn't really go very far. And so that was one of those things where, though, as a GM, I never said, okay, you guys should do this now. It was always more like, hey, there's an opportunity to do this here. I could see a possibility if you guys thought it was interesting. Is that something you want to do?
So the thing is, in both your scenarios, is that they're kind of adding another depth to the story and to that character. They're making that character feel a little bit more alive in the world, which is reasonable. We want to inhabit these personas in some capacity. I think it would be odd. Like, I remember playing a character that one of his backstories was that, his wife had been, was missing, and he was trying to track her down. And I mean, we never finished that campaign, but what would have happened if I found her? Now I'm having to role play out this relationship. I didn't think about it at the time when I made that character, but at some point I'm like, oh, what if I ever catch this MacGuffin?
It's so funny that you say that, because one of the very funnest reveals we talked about cliffhangers at the end of an episode. Mm-hmm. We talked about pulp. One of my favorite cliffhangers in any pulp game I ever played was my character, who was this square-jawed archaeologist, Jack Slate. Mm-hmm. I fed the GM some lines. We were all kind of creating our own supporting cast characters. So I created this female character who was amazing. And I fed the GM the line to give her about Jack at the end of the episode. And so this is a pulp game now that I've been playing with these guys for 3-4 years. And Jack, he's every bit the kind of the Harrison Ford figure we all imagine. Mm-hmm. This woman leans out a second-story window and says, "Jonathan Henry Slate, you get back in here. I'm your wife," and blah, blah, blah. I can't remember what the exact line was, but it hit like a bomb at the table. Everybody turned over and was like, "What?" So that was a lot of fun. And so we met Mrs. Slate that day.
So that is some player and NPC shenanigans. Now let's go to third base.
Oh, no.
Player character and player character romance. Now, before you say like, oh, this doesn't happen, it does. It's happened at the table. Tanis and Loriana from Dragonlance, for us old Gronards who grew up with that second edition, that was two players at the table. That was their character's relationship at the table, was a romance. But my understanding, I haven't watched the show. Ben, you back me up on this. I've heard that Percy and Vex in Critical Role are kind of a couple. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you want the CliffsNotes versions, there's an Amazon show out right now, and you'll you'll get plenty of that relationship context. But yeah.
And having not watched it, I think you might have had or listened to it. How did that play out at the table? Was it something that kind of naturally grew, or was it like something that they planned it in the beginning?
Honestly, I haven't seen the original episode, so I can't say too much. I can say that, of course, these guys are all voice actors and they understand storytelling and character development.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that this was something that certainly was choreographed, and they played with it a bit, and they kind of let it evolve. And it plays well, like in the story. It makes sense. They say meaningful things to each other. So I think there's interesting examples of this with players.
And this could go pear-shaped quick, though, right?
Well,
like this could go bad.
Yeah. Well, you're really on with the metaphors today, aren't you?
Yeah.
Do we have rules for setting boundaries in podcasts too? I don't know.
Not when anybody listens.
Oh, okay. Well, as long as nobody's listening.
What do we need to watch out for?
Most important thing is make sure that if this is going to go on between players, that as we were saying up top, the boundaries are present. Everybody's on board with the amount of this that you're going to do, and everybody's comfortable with seeing people trying to bring that part of the story to life.
Yeah.
With respect to keeping that all kind of under control and bringing story to life rather than graphic details, be appropriate for the table that you're at. You don't want people to have to say, man, get a room. Like, we don't want to be a part of this. Relatedly, is that serving the story, or is it gratuitous? You want to make sure that this is adding to the game. It's not distracting or derailing the energy of the room. If there's supposed to be a moment where we take a moment for our characters who have a romantic connection before we go into a big battle the next day where they may lose their lives, if they want to sort of communicate that to each other, that's a great story driving thing that reinforces the really important stakes of what's to come. But you don't want a 30 or 40-minute thing when you've got a limited amount of time on that day.
I am with you on those suggestions. I think you really got to take those to heart, because this really could blow up a table. So just make sure that communication's open with everybody.
Right. You don't want to explode your game.
We do want to take it all the way home. So we've rounded third base, Ben. It's time to take it home. Let's do some closing thoughts here.
I admire your commitment, Mark.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
What kind of final advice do you have? We've covered NPC romance. We've covered player character to player character romance. We've talked about how to set boundaries and avoid cringe.
The closing thought is this, guys. Just listen. We've already kind of said it, but just listen to your table, listen to your players, and be very candid with each other. And if we're having a good time, that's the goal. So
that's right.
That's
golden rule.
That's about it for our session on Over the Sweater role playing. I think.
Can we get out of this podcast now, please?
No, we have our tune-up next.
On second thought, that may be exactly the wrong sound effect for this segment.
I think we should call this one Pillow Talk.
All right, let's do that. We need to end this thing gently.
So what do we got? What do we got here for our tune-up, Ben?
Well, Mark, we did something special this time. I reached out to my wife, Carrie. She's had a lot of great ideas for us about the podcast. And we thought for a Valentine's Day episode, it would be only appropriate to ask her for a good tune-up question.
What does she got for us?
Carrie said that tabletop RPGs take a lot of time and effort. As married people, what advice do you have to keep your relationships healthy with your significant others while engaged in these games? Let's put that question to you first, Mark.
I was hoping for an easier question.
How long have you been married?
Many years.
Oh, you're not going to say. All right.
It just gives away my age, man.
I think people appreciate knowing that there are some long-term relationships. I know you and Stacy, the lovely Stacy, have been married for a while.
Yeah, very many years. Hey, one of the things we do is I love to talk to her about some of the games and bounce some ideas off her, because she's a great resource for me to throw an idea. And she might kind of go, that's not as good as you think it is. She'll keep me honest, but I think doing things that she enjoys, because she's not a gamer. She doesn't go out and do games. And I also give her space for her hobbies. She likes to knit and do all sorts of stuff. Go to knitting shows and yarn and all that kind of stuff. So
I remember once upon a time seeing a trove of yarn at your house.
Yeah, they call that a yarn stash.
Oh, okay.
And when she's looking at yarn on the internet, she calls it yarn porn. So nice. I will indulge her those as well. So we both have interests and hobbies, and we respect our hobbies, and respect is kind of the main thing.
I think that's great advice. I think that in your head, you should try to keep a little bit of a chess clock and kind of keep track of how many evenings you're spending doing stuff together, how many evenings you're spending doing stuff that she can't be a part of. And like any hobby, it could take as much time as you want to give it, but you do need to cultivate that relationship. You need to treat your significant other well. And I think the general rules that make any relationship long lasting apply here as well. You need to make sure you know when to put it away. And
I mean, we're both doing something right, I guess. We've been married to the same person for a long time. So I'm very fortunate about that. And maybe I don't thank Stacy enough. I just always love that she indulges my habits.
I thank her that she took you off the market because,
Yeah, she took one for the team. Side question, Ben.
All right.
When you first started dating, how long before she knew you were a gamer?
Not that long, but let's be clear. I kind of paid that line out, in measures. It didn't happen all at once.
Yeah. I remember strategically leaving a book or two out. So she might get that little hint.
Right.
She could abandon all hope, ye who see the Dungeon Master by guide on the table.
Right. Maybe don't bring her down into the fully stocked game room. Maybe just happen to leave a player's handbook out on a table somewhere.
Oh, this thing?
Yeah.
It's too late. We're engaged.
All right. Well, you know what, you guys? You'll find a way to make it work. We believe in you.
Yeah. That was a fun episode, Ben. I look forward to our next one. And what do we got coming down the pipe? Do we have anything loaded up here?
Yeah, I've been thinking we've got a great opportunity when we can get scheduled. We've got an interview with a game store owner that I think we'll find really interesting. I think
Let's do it.
Local game stores are a great resource for GMs, and I think we as GMs need to support those game stores too if we can.
We also really like the interview episodes. They're like our favorite ones to do.
Yeah.
And I wish we knew more people.
Well, they're real high energy and they're great.
Oh, I can't wait. It's going to be a lot of fun. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, please send them to tabletoptuneup@gmail.com. If you have any romance suggestions, please don't send them in.
No, we're taken.
Ben, what do we say?
We say until next week. Keep those dice rolling.
Tune up, level up your fun. Tune up, your quest has now begun. Tune up, we'll show you how it's done. Tune up, tune up, tune up, tune up. Level up your fun. Tune up, your quest has now begun. Tune up, we'll show you how it's done. Tune up, tune up, tune up, tune up, Come get your tune up. It's time for your tune up. You can't need to tune up. Tune up, tune up, tune up, tune up. Level up your fun. Tune up, your quest has now begun. Tune up, we'll show you how it's done.